Turn it off. Now. The command sliced through the churchyard so sharply that people flinched before they even understood what had happened. A hymn died mid-note. Silence rushed in, raw, unfinished, wrong. A woman's sob broke through it, loud and unfiltered, the kind of sound grief makes when it's been exposed too suddenly. Somewhere near the front, someone whispered, "Jesus," like a reflex. The officer stood with one hand still raised, fingers hovering inches from the speaker's control panel, as if daring anyone to challenge him. "Did you hear me?" he said. "I said turn it off." The crowd stared. Dozens of people dressed in black. Faces wet with tears. Hands clutching programs, tissues one another. At the center of it all, beneath a white canopy, sat a closed wooden casket surrounded by flowers already wilting under the sun. A burial. And a cop had just silenced the goodbye. Danielle Carter felt the words before she fully processed them. Turn it off. Her chest tightened, like something vital had been grabbed and squeezed. She stood just a few feet from the casket, her father's casket, still holding the folded funeral program she'd been gripping for nearly an hour. The paper was creased and damp where her thumbs pressed into it. She took one step forward. "Officer," she said, her voice steady by force, not feeling. "What are you doing?" The officer turned slowly, sunglasses reflecting the crowd back at itself like a distorted mirror. "Responding to a noise complaint," he replied. Flat, but like he was ordering coffee. Danielle blinked. "A noise complaint?" He nodded once. "Music. Crowd disturbance." She looked around in disbelief. No one had been shouting. No one had been celebrating. There had been no disorder, only mourning. The speaker had been playing a recorded hymn because the choir couldn't sing through tears. And now even that is gone. "This is a funeral," Danielle said. "We're burying my father." The officer exhaled through his nose, irritated. "Ma'am, I don't care what kind of gathering this is. The law doesn't stop because someone passed away." The words hit harder than the silence. Behind Danielle, a murmur rippled through the crowd, low, shocked, angry but restrained. The kind of sound people make when they're trying not to escalate something that already feels wrong. Danielle's younger brother, Marcus Carter, shifted behind her. She could feel his presence before she heard him. "You don't care?" he said quietly. The officer turned his head just enough to acknowledge him. "Sir, back up." Marcus didn't move. Danielle raised her hand slightly without turning around. "Please." Then she faced the officer again. "Officer," she said, choosing every word carefully, "we have permission from the city for this burial. We notified the precinct days ago. Everything is documented." The officer tilted his head, unimpressed. "What you think you have and what actually matters are two different things." That sentence landed like a challenge. The pastor, Reverend Thomas Hale, stepped forward from the side, his black robe moving softly in the breeze. He was mid-50s, calm by nature, grief-lined today. "Officer," the pastor said gently, "we're almost finished. Just a few prayers and—" "No," the officer interrupted sharply. "One word. Final." He stepped closer to the canopy, boots crunching on gravel, his presence suddenly invasive. "No music. No lingering. Clear this area." A woman near the front let out a small, broken sound. Danielle felt heat rise behind her eyes, but she refused to cry. "Not here. Not in front of him. This is private church property," she said. "You don't get to—" "Ma'am," the officer cut in, voice hardening, "you're already being difficult." That word, difficult, hung in the air like an accusation. Danielle's fingers tightened around the program. "Difficult?" she echoed. "We're grieving." "You people always say that," the officer replied. The crowd froze. Danielle felt it then. That sharp shift, that internal alarm that says this is no longer just misunderstanding. Reverend Hale's expression changed. "What do you mean by you people?" the pastor asked quietly. The officer ignored him. Instead, he walked closer to the casket. Too close. Danielle's breath caught. "Officer," she said sharply now, "stop." He didn't. His shadow fell across the polished wood of the casket, dark and intrusive. Marcus took a step forward instinctively. "Don't touch that." The officer turned slowly, one hand dropping to his belt. "Back up," he ordered. Marcus stood his ground. "This is my father," he said, voice shaking. "You don't get to." Danielle stepped between them immediately. "Marcus," she whispered. "Please." Then she faced the officer again, heart pounding. "You are crossing a line," she said. The officer laughed, short, humorless. "Lines?" he said. "I draw the lines." He pulled out a small notepad. "Since you're refusing to comply, I'll start issuing citations. Noise ordinance. Failure to disperse." A gasp moved through the crowd. Citations. At a burial. Danielle felt something in her chest crack, not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough to change her. "My father served this community for 40 years, she said, voice firm now. "He volunteered here. He fixed benches in the park. He prayed for people you've never met. He deserves respect." The officer didn't even look at the casket. "I don't care about your stories," he said. That was the moment. The moment grief turned into something else. "This is evil," a man's voice said from the back. The officer snapped his head around. "What did you say?" "I said this is evil," the man repeated. The officer took 2 aggressive steps toward him. Reverend Hale moved immediately, placing himself between the officer and the man. "Officer," the pastor said calmly, "this is not necessary." "Move," the officer barked. The pastor didn't. "You're obstructing an officer," the cop snapped. "And you're disrupting a burial," the pastor replied. The air felt heavy and tight now. Phones started to rise quietly. Not flashy. Not taunting. Recording. The officer noticed. "Put those down," he ordered. A woman whispered, "We have the right." "I said put them down," he shouted. Danielle watched his face. Not authority. Not professionalism. Control. And suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't about noise. This was about power. Danielle took a slow breath and did something deliberate. She looked at the officer's name tag. "Officer Madden," she said clearly. He turned back toward her. "This church has security cameras." The officer paused. Just for a fraction of a second. Danielle continued, voice steady, calm, dangerous. "Everything that happens here is recorded." The crowd went silent. Officer Madden's mouth curved into a thin smile. "Good," he said. "Then everyone will see how you people behave when you don't get your way." He raised his voice, addressing the entire churchyard. "Last warning. Clear this area, or I start making arrests." Danielle looked at her father's name printed on the program. Samuel Carter. Beloved father. Faithful servant. Community anchor. Then she looked at her mother, sitting motionless under the canopy. Then she turned to Reverend Hale and leaned close. "Open the office," she whispered. "Pull the footage." The pastor's eyes widened slightly. Then he nodded. Behind them, the church doors opened quietly. Inside, a monitor was warming up. Officer Madden didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying the silence he'd forced. But Danielle wasn't silent anymore. She wasn't pleading. She was preparing. Because in a few moments, the truth wouldn't need her voice. It would play itself. And when it did, this wouldn't be a noise complaint anymore. It would be evidence. Officer Madden checked his watch. The gesture was small, almost casual, but it changed the energy immediately. "Time's up," he said. "Everybody needs to start moving." No one moved. Not because they were defiant. Because no one knew how to walk away from a casket that hadn't been lowered yet. Danielle Carter stood where she was, shoulders squared, eyes steady. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at him. "My father hasn't been committed to the ground," she said. "We're not done." Officer Madden scoffed. "That's not my problem." That was the moment people stopped hoping this would end peacefully. Marcus felt it first, the shift. The way grief hardened into something colder. He stepped closer to Danielle without even realizing it, positioning himself between her and the officer like muscle memory had taken over. Reverend Hale inhaled slowly, then spoke. "Officer, I'm asking this man, give us 5 minutes." Madden laughed. "5 minutes?" he said. You don't get 5 seconds. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones came up again, steadier this time. No shaking hands. No hesitation. Recording wasn't a reaction anymore. It was a decision. Officer Madden noticed. You think that scares me? He snapped. All you're doing is proving my point. Danielle tilted her head slightly. What point is that? That you people don't know how to follow instructions. The sentence landed hard. You could feel it hit chest. Hear it in the way breath left bodies all at once. Danielle didn't respond immediately. She turned instead, slowly, toward the church building behind them. Toward the open doors. Reverend, she said calmly, bring them out here. Officer Madden frowned. Bring who out? Danielle looked back at him. The ushers. The secretary. Anyone who was inside when you arrived. His jaw tightened. You don't get to run this scene. I'm not, she replied. You already did. Reverend Hale hesitated for only a second before nodding and stepping inside. That hesitation was enough. Officer Madden stepped forward sharply. Hey, where do you think you're going? The pastor didn't stop. The officer's voice rose. I gave you an order. Danielle turned back to him, eyes sharp now. You gave a command, she said. There's a difference. The doors opened again. 3 people stepped out. Mrs. Whitaker first. 70 years old. Church secretary. Hair neatly pinned. Expression unreadable. Behind her, 2 ushers. And in Mrs. Whitaker's hands, a tablet. The crowd leaned forward instinctively. Officer Madden stared at it. What's that? Mrs. Whitaker didn't answer him. She walked straight to Danielle and held the tablet out. Everything from today, she said quietly. Officer Madden laughed once, sharp and dismissive. You think footage changes the law? Danielle took the tablet but didn't look at it yet. She held it like evidence already weighed. No, she said. It changes the story. She turned the screen outward so the nearest people could see. The first frame froze. Officer Madden's patrol car pulling in fast. The hymn still playing. The crowd was standing still. Quiet. Respectful. Unthreatening. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Officer Madden took a step forward. Turn that off. Danielle didn't. The video played. His voice came through the tablet speaker. Unedited. Unforgiving. Turn it off. Now. The crowd reacted audibly this time. Not murmurs. Guess. Hands flew to mouths. Officer Madden reached out. That's enough. Danielle stepped back just out of his reach. No, she said. Now it's accurate. The footage continued. His tone. His words. His proximity to the casket. The moment he reached for his belt. The moment he said it. You people always say that. Silence fell so fast it felt like gravity changed. Officer Madden's face drained of color. That's not, he started. Mrs. Whitaker spoke calmly. Time-stamped, unedited, uploaded. Marcus exhaled slowly. You said it. Officer Madden looked around and realized something too late. This wasn't a crowd anymore. It was a jury. No one spoke. Not right away. The last words from the tablet. You people always say that, hung in the air like smoke after a firecracker, sharp and undeniable. Even the birds that had been chirping earlier seemed to have gone quiet, as if the afternoon itself had decided to listen. Officer Madden looked around. Really looked this time. Not at the casket. Not at Danielle. At the people. Their faces had changed. Grief was still there, raw, heavy, but it had been joined by something steadier. Something colder. The kind of clarity that arrives when doubt evaporates. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was documented. You're twisting this, Madden said, too quickly. His voice was louder than it needed to be, trying to muscle its way back into authority. I was dealing with a hostile crowd. A laugh broke out. Short, bitter. It came from Mr. Darnell, the head usher, a man who had spent 3 decades guiding people to their seats with nothing but a raised eyebrow and patience. Hostile. Mr. Darnell repeated. Son, we were singing. Madden turned on him. Sir, I did not ask for your opinion. No, Mr. Darnell replied calmly. You just took it anyway. A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. Madden opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. Sirens cut through the moment. 2 patrol cars slowed as they approached the churchyard, their presence measured, not aggressive. Doors opened. Officers stepped out, but their body language was different from Madden's. Less swagger, more assessment. The first to emerge was Sergeant Leon Harding. Gray at the temples. Calm eyes. The kind of man who didn't rush because he'd learned rushing made things worse. He took in the scene in seconds. The casket. The black-clad crowd. The tablet in Danielle's hands. Officer Madden standing stiff, jaw tight, trying to look unbothered. Harding's gaze settled on the tablet. "What's playing?" he asked. Danielle didn't answer immediately. She didn't rush toward him, didn't plead for his attention. She simply held the tablet up and turned the volume slightly higher. The clip replayed. Harding watched without interrupting. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. When the clip ended, he nodded once. Then he turned to Madden. "Is that your voice?" Harding asked. Madden swallowed. "It's out of context." Harding tilted his head. "Is it your voice?" "Yes," Madden snapped. "But..." "Body cam," Harding said, holding out his hand. Madden froze. "Sir?" "Your body cam," Harding repeated. "Now." The word now landed differently when it came from Harding. Slowly, Madden reached up and unclipped the camera, placing it into Harding's outstretched palm. Harding didn't look at it yet. He gestured to another officer. "Bag it." The officer complied. Harding turned back to Danielle. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. Danielle nodded. "Just once. No tears. No thanks." The sergeant looked at the casket, then back at Madden. "You're relieved," Harding said. Madden's eyes widened. "Sir, I..." "Step away from the family," Harding continued. "Now." Madden hesitated, then took a step back. It felt like the ground shifted. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough to be felt. Harding addressed the crowd. "Everyone, please remain calm. This will be handled." The words sounded hollow after what had already happened. Danielle didn't feel relief. She felt exhausted. The kind that settles deep, not in muscles but in bones. She handed the tablet back to Mrs. Whitaker, who clutched it like something fragile and sacred. Marcus leaned close. "You okay?" Danielle nodded. "I will be." Her mother hadn't moved this entire time. She still sat beneath the canopy, hands folded, eyes unfocused. Danielle walked to her slowly and knelt. "Mom," she whispered. "We're okay." Her mother blinked, then nodded faintly. "I just want your father buried." The sentence broke something open in Danielle's chest. She stood and faced Harding. "We need to finish," she said. "That's all." Harding nodded. "You will." He turned to the officers. "Clear the perimeter." No further interaction. Madden watched as another officer gently guided him toward the patrol car. His shoulders sagged as he walked, the fight draining out of him. But the story wasn't over. Danielle felt it. And so did Harding. Because footage doesn't stay where it's born. Someone in the crowd uploaded the clip. Quietly. Efficiently. By the time the final prayer was spoken and the casket was lowered into the ground, phones across the churchyard buzzed. Danielle didn't check hers. She didn't need to. The hymn started again, this time sung, not played. Voices trembling, imperfect, real. When the last handful of dirt hit the casket, something shifted in Danielle's spirit. Her father was laid to rest. But the truth had just been unearthed. By sunset, the video had spread. Not just shared. Replicated. Clipped, reposted, zoomed in, slowed down. The phrase, "You people always say that," was dissected, captioned, debated. Local pages picked it up first. Then citywide. Then statewide. By nightfall, national accounts were reposting it. Madden's face, once hidden behind sunglasses, was everywhere. The department released a statement just before midnight. "We are aware of a video circulating online involving one of our officers. The incident is under review." Under review. Danielle read the statement once and set her phone down. Marcus scoffed. "They always say that." Danielle didn't respond. She was staring at another message. From an unfamiliar number. This is Internal Affairs. We need to speak with you. She closed her eyes. Her father had taught her something when she was young. When the truth comes out, it doesn't ask permission. The next morning, news vans lined the street outside the church. Reporters spoke into cameras where flowers still lay. Danielle stood inside, watching through the window. She wasn't ready to speak yet, but others were. Mrs. Whitaker gave an interview. Mr. Darnell spoke too. So did Reverend Hale. Each voice added weight. Not emotion, evidence. Harding called Danielle that afternoon. Internal Affairs has pulled Madden's record, he said. This isn't his first complaint. Danielle closed her eyes. How many? She asked. Enough, Harding replied. And now there's video. That night, Danielle sat alone in her living room, her father's Bible open on the table in front of her. Her phone buzzed again. A notification. Officer Grayson Madden placed on administrative leave pending investigation. She stared at the screen. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like responsibility. Because she knew something now. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about what people were allowed to get away with when no one was watching. And what happens when someone finally turns the camera on. Outside, the city hummed on. Inside, Danielle made a quiet promise. To her father, to herself, to the people who'd stood beside that casket. She wouldn't let this fade into another headline. She wouldn't let it be buried. Because grief had taken enough. And silence was no longer an option. The city woke up already knowing. Danielle Carter didn't need to turn on the television to feel it. She felt it in the way her phone buzzed non-stop on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the wood like it was trying to escape. She felt it in the stillness of the house, too quiet now that her father's voice would never fill it again. She poured coffee she didn't want and stared out the window at a morning that looked exactly the same as yesterday. The world hadn't changed, but something underneath it had cracked. Her phone lit up again. A message from Internal Affairs. Another from a local reporter. A voicemail from a city council aide asking for a moment of her time. Danielle didn't answer any of them. Not yet. She picked up her father's Bible instead, the same one that had rested on his lap every morning before sunrise. The spine was broken in, pages soft, corners worn down by decades of turning. She opened it without looking for a passage and let it fall where it wanted. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. She closed the book. Justice didn't roll on its own. Someone had to open the gate. At police headquarters, Officer Grayson Madden sat alone in a small, windowless room with beige walls and a single metal chair. His uniform was gone. His badge sat on the table in front of him, face down. Across from him, an Internal Affairs investigator scrolled through a tablet. They didn't raise their voice. They didn't need to. The footage spoke for them. Walk us through your decision-making, the investigator said calmly. Madden swallowed. I responded to a call. About noise, the investigator said. Yes. And when you arrived, the investigator continued, you observed a funeral. Madden nodded stiffly. Did you consider de-escalation? Madden hesitated. The investigator didn't interrupt. The silence stretched. I followed procedure, Madden said finally. The investigator looked up. Procedure doesn't include racial language, they said. Procedure doesn't include threatening arrests at a burial. Procedure doesn't include approaching a casket. Madden's jaw clenched. I didn't mean. Intent isn't the question, the investigator cut in. Impact is. They turned the tablet so Madden could see the screen. Paused on his own face. Mouth mid-sentence. You people always say that. Madden looked away. By noon, the department released another statement. Not vague this time. Officer Grayson Madden has been placed on indefinite administrative leave pending the outcome of a formal investigation into conduct unbecoming, abuse of authority, and violation of departmental policy. Indefinite. The words spread quickly. So did something else. Former complaints. Anonymous tips. Stories from people who had seen Madden on their street, during traffic stops, during routine calls, that somehow always ended with humiliation. Patterns began to emerge. The kind that only appear once people realize they're not alone. Danielle watched it unfold from a distance. She sat at the dining table with Marcus, their mother resting in the next room. The house smelled faintly of leftover food from the repast, though most of it had gone untouched. "This is bigger than us," Marcus said quietly, scrolling through his phone. Danielle nodded. "It always was." He looked at her. "Are you ready for what comes next?" She thought about the cameras, the screen, the moment the truth played itself without her having to raise her voice. "I didn't choose this," she said, "but I won't run from it." 2 days later, Danielle stood at the podium in the church fellowship hall. Not outside, inside, where her father had taught Bible study, where he'd stacked chairs and swept floors long after everyone else went home. Cameras lined the back wall. Microphones waited. The room was full. Danielle adjusted the mic and took a breath. "I didn't ask to be here," she began. "I asked to bury my father." The room went still. "What happened at his funeral wasn't about a noise complaint," she continued. "It was about power. And what happens when power goes unchecked." She didn't name the officer. She didn't need to. "This isn't just about one person," Danielle said. "It's about every moment someone saw something wrong and looked away because it was easier. It's about silence." She paused. "Silence is not neutral," she said. "Silence sides with whatever is happening." The words settled into the room. "My father believed in dignity," Danielle continued. "Not the kind you demand, but the kind you live." She looked directly into the cameras now. "If you watched that video and felt uncomfortable, that's good. Discomfort is where change begins." She stepped back from the mic. That was all she needed to say. The consequences followed. Officer Madden resigned before the investigation concluded. The department announced mandatory retraining on de-escalation and bias. The city council scheduled a public hearing. None of it brought Danielle's father back. None of it erased the interruption, the humiliation, the shadow cast over a goodbye that should have been peaceful. But it did something else. It made it harder for the next officer to pretend no one was watching. It made it harder for silence to hide. On Sunday morning, the church was full. The choir sang again, voices strong this time. Danielle sat in the front pew with her mother and Marcus. When the hymn ended, Reverend Hale spoke. "Last week," he said, "we learned something painful. But pain is not the end of the story." He looked out over the congregation. "What we do after the truth is revealed, that's who we are." Danielle felt her father's presence then. Not as a memory, as an instruction. Later that afternoon, Danielle returned to the churchyard alone. The canopy was gone. The flowers had been cleared. Only fresh earth remained. She knelt and placed her hand on the ground. "I did my best," she whispered. The wind moved through the trees softly. She stood, brushed the dirt from her hands and walked away. Not in anger. In resolve. If you're still here, let's be honest. This story isn't rare. What's rare is the footage. What's rare is the moment when silence breaks. So here's the question, and it's not rhetorical. When you see something wrong, do you stay quiet? Or do you become part of the record? Because dignity doesn't need permission. And injustice depends on complicity. If this story moved you, comment below. What would you have done at that moment? And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe for more real, powerful narratives where truth is exposed, accountability follows, and silence doesn't get the last word. Because every watch, every comment, every share, it all adds up. And it all matters.